So, as Andy has already told us, this week's topic is about living prayerfully. This is part of a series of topics that we've been doing about spiritual practices. So hopefully you've got some slides coming up on the screen in just a moment. Pete? Fantastic. Okay, so we've been doing a whole series on spiritual practices. So a couple of weeks ago, we had Will talking to us about learning and discipleship. Last week, Phil was talking to us about engaging in mission and evangelism. And then in future weeks, we've still got to look forward to learning about practicing hospitality, about celebrating creativity, and expressing God's mercy and justice. But I've already said, this week, we're starting with a topic of living prayerfully. Now, some of you may already know that I work as a software developer, writing code for websites. That's got Will all excited. So my job is to craft intricately detailed and precise instructions to tell a computer exactly what it should and should not do in each and every circumstance. Now, when I get this right, it helps trainee social workers, German language students, NHS workers, and in this particular case, Church of England ordinands, to access the learning that they need to be able to progress, to be able to do their jobs. But more often than not, our QA department, our testing department, sends me something that looks a little bit like this. At which point, my immediate reaction is to grumble, to push back and say, you've done something silly, you've done it wrong. But ultimately, I have to at some point admit responsibility, say, yeah, my code, I got it wrong, I need to fix it, I need to sort it out. Because on one level, in my job, it's all about me, about what I do. Now, which is not in any way to diminish the role played by all the other members of the team, the people who talk to the customers, the people who test it, the people who deploy the code. But when it comes to the actual code itself, it's all on me. It's my responsibility. I have to get it right, and I have to fix it when I get it wrong. Now, why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you this because this is almost the exact opposite of what prayer is about. Prayer is not all about me. Prayer is not about me crafting the exact words that are needed in order to get God to do what I want him to do. Prayer, at its heart, is about God. Prayer is about saying to God, you're in charge. It's not about what I am going to say. It's not about what I want. It's not about me trying to browbeat you into doing what I want. It's about saying, God, you're in charge. Now, in my job, it helps to play into that illusion that I'm fully in control, that I can control everything that happens. But that's not the reality of the world today. We do not have control over the bad things that happen in life. We do not have control over illness, over troubles, over pain, over suffering. But what we can do is we can take those back to God and we can lay them at his feet. Now, often, prayer can seem to make no sense at all, just speaking out into the ether. But at the same time, when you get to the end of yourself and you run out of anything more that you can give, prayer may be the only thing that makes any sense at all. So what does a life lived prayerfully look like? Well, I thought I'd give a look at a few examples of some people throughout history who are often held up as good examples of a prayerful life. The first one I want to look at is a guy called Brother Lawrence, who was a monk living in the 17th century in France. Now, his thoughts are captured in a book called The Practice of the Presence of God, which I highly recommend to anyone. It's freely available on the internet. I just want to read out a short quote from this. In his business in the kitchen, to which he had naturally a great aversion, having accustomed himself to do everything there for the love of God and asking for his grace to do his work well, he had found everything easy during the 15 years he'd been employed there. He was very pleased with the post he was now in, yet he was ready to quit that as the former, since he tried to please God by doing little things for the love of him in any work he did. With him, the set times of prayer were not different to other times. He retired to pray according to the direction of his superior, but he did not need such retirement, nor ask for it, because his greatest business did not divert him from God. Now, I don't know about you, but I can really relate to the humanness and the humanity of someone being stuck in the middle of something they don't particularly want to do and don't particularly enjoy. In this case, Brother Lawrence was not particularly fond of working in the kitchen. Yet, in that, he was able to see beyond the immediate actions that he was taking and see that what he was doing, what could be done out of love for God. And to me, that is the heart of what living prayerfully is. At each moment, being aware of God's presence and seeking after God and knowing that whatever you do, big or small, can be done out of love for God. So to use a word from a hymn that we're going to be listening to or singing along to later, he spent his time abiding with God and inviting God to abide with him. Now, moving on to a slightly more recent example, the Anglican priest and theologian John Stott, who sadly passed away 10 years ago now, which was a bit of a surprise. It felt much more recent than that. I was reading a magazine article just the other day about him, and it included these words. In the last decade of his life, he was asked what, if anything, he would change if he were to live his life again. He paused thoughtfully and answered, I would pray more. This was the response of someone who, while at university, set his alarm clock to 6 a.m. to pray. In later life, this changed to 5 a.m. Stott kept a notebook of situations and people to pray about. He began and ended each day in prayer, and he prayed throughout the day. His life was infused by prayer. Prayer is not a convenient device for imposing our will upon God or bending his will to ours, he wrote, but the prescribed way of subordinating our will to his. Now, to my mind, Brother Lawrence and John Stott are great examples of lives lived in prayer, abiding in his presence. But both of them, I am sure, if they were asked, would have quickly pointed away from themselves to our ultimate guide to what a life of prayer looks like. That, obviously, being the life of Jesus. So Jesus said in John chapter 5, says, the Son can do nothing by himself. He does only what he sees the Father doing. So Jesus himself, how did Jesus know what the Father was doing? How was he able to see exactly what the Father was doing. And I would argue that was because of what it says in Mark chapter 1. Very early in the morning, whilst it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Jesus was able to know what the Father wanted and to do what the Father wanted him to do because of the time he spent in prayer, abiding in the Father's love. So we were also thinking, we heard in the passage earlier, the disciples turning to Jesus and asking him, how should we pray? And this is the prayer that Jesus gave them to show them, as a model, as an example of how it is that we should pray. And there are a few things I just wanted to point out about this prayer. The first of all, it starts off by hallowed be your name. It doesn't say, Lord, make us really important, make us really successful, make us loved by everyone around us. It says, and the first step is, God, you have the glory. And then the second thing we ask for, give us each day our daily bread. Hopefully in a moment. There we go. Give us each day our daily bread. It doesn't say, give us today all the riches that we would like. Give us today a new car and a private jet and a new graphics card for my computer because I like playing really good computer games. It says, give us today what you know we need. It's not about us. It's about what God knows we need. And the final part of it is forgive us our sins. Again, forgive us when we turn from what you want, from your path, God. Again, it's all about God. He is the focus. So finally, I wanted to ask, what about us? What about you? What is it that is holding you back from a fuller life lived in prayer? Now, in my case, one of the biggest struggles I have is just not seeing a direct link between what I pray and what God does. I know that when in my job, when I write a line of computer code, I can run the code immediately, and straight away I can see exactly what's changed. I might not have got it right. It might have gone horrendously wrong with that line of code I've changed, but I can see the change immediately. There is a direct link between I wrote that code and this has happened. But prayer's not like that. We can be praying, and sometimes God seems to act, and sometimes God does not seem to act. Whole part of prayer is it's an ongoing relationship with God. It's not a mechanical thing whereby we see the direct results. So I struggle with that because I like to know going in exactly what I'm going to get out. And this relates to another very closely related reason why it might be holding you back in prayer. It's one of control. We like to be in charge. We like to have control. And prayer at its heart is about giving up that control and letting God have control. So maybe there is an aspect in your life that you know that you're not willing to be giving up control of. Is there something in your life which you're not praying about simply because you don't really want God to actually take charge of that area? Or maybe to go push this a little further, is there an aspect of your life where there is a known ongoing sin in your life? Something that you're just not willing to let go of, and so you're not willing to pray about. And one final area I wanted to raise is that of unanswered prayer. Have you prayed big prayers in the past that just don't seem to have had an answer? So that now you don't pray for big things. You just pray for small, vague things where you can't even really tell if they've ever been answered or not. So you don't have to confront the problem that maybe they haven't been answered. Now, I do want to emphasize at this point, I am not going to now dive deep into this topic, nor am I going to try and offer really trite, easy answers to it, because this is a really big topic that deserves a lot more time and sensitivity than I can give it on this particular occasion. But I think it still is worth raising and mentioning. So maybe I've missed something. Maybe there is something on there up on the which I haven't put up on the screen that is holding you back in prayer. I'm sure I haven't covered everything. One thing I have left out very deliberately is the "I have no time" or "I'm too busy." Speaking for myself, I am convinced that if I took prayer anywhere near as seriously as I should, then lack of time would quickly cease to be an issue. So as I finish, I want to repeat the question as a challenge to you. What in your life is holding you back from a fuller life of prayer? Now, in a moment, we're just going to be listening to a hymn, "Abide With Me." And I'd like to ask you, during that hymn, just to take a few moments to think through those points up on there, or whatever it is that might be holding you back from a fuller life of prayer.